it's Mo. It is April, and that means it is time for one of my favorite readathons of the year, and that is hashtag transgirlapril. Transgirlapril was started by Kevi at Say Kevi, and it's a time to read more trans authors and more trans stories. I love that this readathon happens just a little bit after the Trans Rights Reasathon, which happens towards the end of March usually, and just after the Trans Day of Visibility, which is also in the end of March, so you get even more opportunity. Like, if you like the Trans Rights Readathon, then you can continue your trans reading into April. Not that we should only read trans books in April or in March or for these readathons. We should be reading trans books, and we should be reading trans authors, and we should be reading trans stories all the time, of course. But one of the things that I really like about this event happening in April is that it is early enough in the year that if I haven't read a lot of trans authors, it gives me that push to incorporate trans authors into my reading and remind me that the trans authors is a smaller population, especially what we're exposed to, than many other populations of authors. So it's important to seek those authors out and those stories out and read those stories. For the Trans Rights Readathon, I read Bitter by Akwaeke Meze. This is the prequel to Pet, which I read a few years ago, and I had such a great time reading this. I really love Emeze's writing, and I really love the universe that they have created with Pet, Bitter, Jam, Aloe, and so many of the other characters. It was also really interesting to read a prequel to Pet and learn more about Jam's mother, Bitter, who the prequel revolves around her history, her story, but also it had so much to do with how the events of Pet happened, how they came about, why they came about. So I loved reading that one, and I definitely plan to read more Emeze and any work that they put out, but also I want more in this universe, and I definitely hope that they put it out as well. So it was really nice to get a head start on Transgirlapril by starting to read in March. And then the next book that I read for Transgirlapril was Magic for Liars by Sarah Gailey. Sarah Gailey is a non-binary author, and this is the third Sarah Gailey book that I've read, and I really, really enjoy their work. I loved this book. I thought it was great, and I think I liked it so much because it was a cozy mystery, essentially. It follows our main character, Ivy, who is a private detective and ends up having to go to her sister's magic school to solve a crime. So Ivy and her sister are twins, but they're estranged, and Ivy worries about going to this magic school, partly for that reason and partly because Ivy herself is not magic. Since the principal or the headmistress of the school asked for Ivy specifically to try and solve this crime, Ivy feels it's her duty to go, and maybe she'll even get to rekindle a relationship with her sister as well. Magic for Liars could be considered a dark academia. It has dark academia vibes for sure, but it is a little light on the academia, I think, to make it dark academia. I really liked the world that Sarah Gailey created, and I really liked Ivy's character. She's definitely part noir detective, and she's also definitely part like damaged sister and child, and it was interesting to see her reactions to different things, learn about her life, and learn about her relationships with various people in this book. I loved all the casual queerness in this and all the representation that we got, and I liked that the magic system wasn't overly explained except in parts where it felt needed. It didn't feel super heavily like a fantasy book, which I enjoyed. Just enough fantasy and magic that it was mostly cozy mystery with a little bit of magic. So I'm super glad to have read another Sarah Gailey, and I definitely plan to read more of their work as well. Another book that I have already read for Transgirlapril is All Boys Aren't Blue by George M. Johnson. This is the first George M. Johnson I've ever read. I don't know if they have other books out actually, but I do know that All Boys Aren't Blue, which is a memoir, is one of the most contested or banned books in America right now, and that's just one more reason that everyone should read it. Another reason that everyone should read All Boys Aren't Blue is because it's a very interesting look at George's life and how they grew up in Paterson, New Jersey. Shout out to New Jersey, I love it, as a young queer boy, and how they came to find out their queer identity and their non-binary identity, and how their life and their discovery and George's journey with all those things is not over. This story mostly focuses on George's childhood and also about their family growing up and what their family means to them. George was extremely lucky that they grew up in a family with a lot of queerness already, and so even though they struggled with their queer identity, they were never ostracized or made to feel wrong specifically by their family. Some of those feelings, of course, do come up, as with many queer people growing up, but George was able to overcome them, and they wrote this memoir to help other people who might be in similar situations. So I really enjoyed this book, and I thought it was interesting because it is a YA geared book, but it doesn't shy away from harsh topics like sexual abuse and explicit sexual nature and queerness and all sorts of issues that other YA books might gloss over or shy away from. George's book is specifically designed not to shy away from those things, and that's probably how it's placed its spot on the ban list, because there is sex talked about in this book, there is sexual abuse talked in this book, there is grooming talked in this book. So there are, different aspects of this book that might seem like too much for teenagers, teen readers, or younger readers, but I think the way that this book is very simply written and very clearly written. There's not a lot of beating around the bush, pussyfooting around. It's very simple. It's very plain language. It's very easy to understand. And so any terms that you might not know or things that you might understand would be easy to bring up in a classroom setting or in a family setting to talk about with younger readers. Of course, I love that it's from New Jersey and that George lived in New Jersey for a majority of their life, and their kind of views on that, and then also, which were mostly to get out of New Jersey, but I understand that. I wonder now if they think differently about New Jersey and they feel differently about New Jersey now that they're older and now that they've kind of moved on from New Jersey, because I know that's how I felt about New Jersey, and maybe that's how lots of people, especially queer people growing up, feel about their hometowns. I also really enjoyed that this book was written in different sections and in slightly different styles. Like, the language never changed and the simplicity of idea explanation never changed, but the way that it was told, sometimes this book is written as almost an epistolary book, an open letter to the people in George's life. Sometimes it's written in breaking the fourth wall, talking to the reader kind of way. And so I think this would be a really good one to read physically. I did read this on audio, and George M. Johnson narrates their own book, so that was really awesome. I always love memoirs when they're narrated by the author themselves. So those are 3 trans books that I've read recently, and I have a few more on my physical TBR. Because I've been reading books that are not on my physical TBR, I feel like I should read books that are on my physical TBR. One of the books that I have is Paul Takes the Form of a Mortal Girl by Andrea Lawyer. Andrea Lawyer is a trans author, and this book I think was written in the 90s. It's kind of a queer classic, and it is about a shapeshifter, but I think it's more about gender identity and all the different sorts of manifestations that can take. A few years ago, I got Summer Fun by Jean Thornton. I actually have no clue what this book is about, but I hope that it has summer fun in it. I got Elote by Ashola von Reinhold, mostly because Brian at Bookish really loves this book. I thought it sounded interesting, but the way that he talks about this book just really makes me want to read it. It is very long, and I think it is kind of experimental in its style. So it is an intimidating book, but I do want to read it. I had never heard of Defense of an Other by Grace Mead before I picked it up, I think at a Goodwill. Grace Mead is a lawyer and lives in New Orleans, and this is kind of a political law thriller set in New Orleans, and we all know that I love books set in New Orleans. One thing that I definitely want to get to in April is the Gender Stories issue of the Bandit zine. I got this from my friend Noah a long time ago, and Noah really enjoyed it, and I just have never read it. This is just a little zine with lots of different types of gender stories in it, and I think that this one would be a great one to read in April. And then the other one that I would really like to read this month is Sorrowland by River Solomon. I've had this one on my TBR for a very long time, but it's another chunky, kind of intimidating one. But I've read one other River Solomon, which was The Deep, and I really enjoyed that. So I think I'll enjoy this one too, and I'm looking forward to getting to it. I also have a ton of trans books that I have saved on Libby or on Hoopla that I would love to get to, but like I said, I am trying to read physical books this month if I can. Those are the books that I've read so far for Trans Girl April, and the books that I might read for Trans Girl April, my pile of possibilities. Let me know what you're reading for this readathon. Let me know what you've already read. Let me know in the comments below, like, one of your favorite trans books. I think one of my favorite things about this readathon is that it reminds me and reminds other readers that the trans experience is a very wide spectrum, and that there are all sorts of trans identities, just like there are all sorts of queer identities, and it's great to read them, either nonfiction or fiction, and learn more about all the different people that make up the trans community. Sake Heavy put out a very short video for Trans Girl April. I don't think she's going to be making any more this month, so if you have a video that you would like to make for Trans Girl April readathon this month, I would definitely do so, and make sure that people know about this great readathon and a great reminder and a good way to read more trans authors. Thanks so much for joining me today, and I'll see you in the next one. Bye!